My name is Tim Maguire. I'm the president of CUPE Local 79. I represent the approximately 20,000 members of the inside workers at the city delivering services to Toronto's communities. And before I get into the specifics of my comment on this very important issue, I want to say that this is part of an historic debate. Part of an historic debate that's happening in cities across the world. It's happening because of the changing economy, changing technologies, new players, new standards. And what this debate ought to be about is what is the public interest? What is the public interest as we define what should be done in the City of Toronto? And everyone is watching what is happening in the City of Toronto, as everybody was watching what's happening in Edmonton and other cities around the world. And what are the values that drive deciding what's in the public interest? The proposed vehicle for hire bylaw creates a two-tiered system that lowers standards across the industry rather than raising standards for unregulated participants. Yes, there's some suggestions in terms of standards that should be applied in some particular areas. The city should regulate the industry in the public interest to meet goals of consumer protection, public safety, economic and environmental health, not move in the direction of a self-regulating and self-training industry that supports a market interest, not the public interest. Trying to manage the sharing economy by letting the market run itself is not the answer to this very important question we are considering. Market forces alone are not in the best interest of the public, they're in the best interest of individuals. And I get that we're in a changing society and a changing economy. I too have 25-year-old twins, and I have these discussions about the changing world all the time, so I talk to them about the values that define public interests and try and educate them as a parent. Many of the proposed changes in the bylaw reduce public safety and consumer protection. Lessening or reviewing with a view of lessening the standards of city-run vehicle inspections puts drivers, passengers, and pedestrians at risk. Inspections were introduced for taxicabs in 1998 due to the poor conditions of vehicles on the road. Uber vehicles are not required to have these city inspections. And if there's improvements that need to be made in the area of inspections and other areas, make them. Don't make them self-regulating. Eliminating mandatory training, including accessibility training and CPR for new licenses, significantly lowers current industry standards. Training is not only good for the public as it improves customer safety and service, it is also good for the drivers. The city says it will increase accessibility, but they are transferring the responsibility for wheel-trans and other accessibility issues to the industry, the private companies, not the public oversight. Third-party criminal and background checks for Uber drivers rely on private companies to ensure minimum standards are being met. This should not be about minimum standard, it ought to be about highest standards. In a competitive market where Uber primarily focuses to continue operations at all costs, lower costs, the public has no guarantee drivers have passed appropriate screening. With regard to passenger fares and driver livelihood, surge pricing that allows Uber drivers to set their own rates when demand is high does not protect consumers and leads to price gouging. Taxi drivers cannot adjust rates. This means lowering earning potential when they already pay higher licensing fees. The separate fee structure has the opposite effect of increasing competitiveness and puts drivers at a disadvantage to their less regulated competitors. I'll skip over some of this. The main concept on this is we ought to be pushing to maintain living standards and wages and stable work lives, not lower them to the lower common denominator. It's not in the public interest to exacerbate rising income inequality by succumbing to market pressure to reduce the income of taxi drivers. And on upholding accountability, city staff and council are responsible for the economic and environmental health of this city. With no restriction on the number of vehicles on the road, there will be an increased congestion and greater challenges for enforcement staff as bylaw infractions and customer complaints increase. And these, I also represent these members.
Thank you, Mr. Maguire. Any questions from outside councillors? No. Members of the committee? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.